Welcome back. My name is Jim Kaseman, and we're talking about how to get to know God intimately. And we introduced the last session, introduced it by saying that we're beginning to teach on how to be led by the Spirit. Now, I taught on that in this book, Spiritology, that I wrote, but my purpose in these next sessions is to, of course, just review it just a little bit so that we're on the same page, but to mostly share examples or testimonies about my personal life and Kathleen's. We've had a lot of successes since 1975, since we graduated from Bible school, where we were taught how to be led by the Spirit. But then we've also had a lot of failures. And I know a lot of times people don't want to talk about the failures. But as I've been thinking about this for quite a few weeks now, it just becomes more and more stronger in my heart that why not just share some of our successes and failures so that you can do the right thing and not make the same mistakes that I made and learn from them. And so that's the purpose of this, because I, more than anything, would like to see everybody that I'm talking to be successful spiritually and make it to heaven and not miss it. And you read the book of Hebrews, and it's pretty solemn. In other words, Christians can actually be born again, lose their salvation, go to hell. And so when you're talking about asking Jesus to come in your heart, you're talking about asking him to be Lord of your life, and it's a daily thing that you fellowship with him, and you're daily led by the Spirit and daily obeying God. It's a way of life. It's not just something that you do 20 years ago. I asked Jesus into my heart, now I can live like the devil and go to heaven. It doesn't work that way. Absolutely not. And so then, I decided I will just read the back part of this book here, and as an introduction. And it says, the study of spirit, soul, and body is a fundamental truth that all born-again Christians need to understand. It is through having a clear revelation of spirit, soul, and body that you're able to walk by faith and be led by the Spirit. And Satan has counterfeited, listen to this, Satan has counterfeited the working of the Holy Spirit in the soul, where your intellect and emotions abide, and in the flesh, in your mind. He tries to take control of your mind, your emotions, and all of that. And many Christians think that they're being led by the Holy Spirit when they are actually being led by their mind, their emotions, or their human reasoning, that would be the mind, or the sinful, lustful desires of the flesh. They're being led by sinful, lustful desires of the flesh, their emotions, their reasoning, human reasoning. And that is not how you're led by the Spirit. And so then, as we study spirit, soul, and body, we find that it's important. You've got to know the difference between you as a human spirit and your physical body and your soul, which is the mind, will, and emotions. You've got to know the difference, or you'll be deceived by Satan. You have to know, we have to dominate our physical bodies. And the majority of Christians, and the world is already controlled by their flesh. But unfortunately, a lot of Christians are also controlled or dominated by their flesh, and they're missing it. They're missing it, and and Satan's having a wonderful time defeating them. And then so we have to learn how to develop a strong human spirit. And of course, we're wired as human spirits so that we can clearly hear God's voice if we will know how to do it. Now, recognizing the voice of the Holy Spirit should be just as real to you as understanding the voice of someone that you love. By understanding spirit, soul, and body, you'll never again question whose voice you are hearing. Because believe me, there's lots of voices out there in the spiritual dimension that are constantly trying to get our attention, and the majority of them are not God. And so we'll never again question whose voice you are hearing, but will quickly recognize the voice of the Holy Spirit. And so we'll endeavor to do that, and hopefully with enough illustrations, it'll become reality. All right. So then, I mentioned before in the last session that I was 29 years old. My wife and I both received the Lord when we were 29 years old. So for 29 years, I was not a Christian. Came in this world like everybody else, born with the nature of sin. And then, of course, as a child, I grew up. Now, I understood from what my mother told me later, many years later, that as a young boy, I had talked about being a pastor. Now, that's really interesting. So way back there, the Holy Spirit is trying to get my attention. But of course, I'm not born again. And then, of course, I ended up then later in life as an alcoholic. And of course, during that period of time when I was an alcoholic and on drugs and all that sort of stuff, it was amazing. I even was thinking of applying to go to the Lutheran seminary. Isn't that something? So the Holy Spirit is still tugging, trying to get me in the right direction. Of course, I don't know it. Never read the Bible. Don't know God. No, there is somebody out there that's created everything, but when we die, we'll appear before him, and that's when he'll say, okay, you go to hell, you go to heaven. And that's about as much as I knew. But I look back now, and the Holy Spirit was tugging on me to try to get me going in the right direction. However, it was too late, because I already had fell off the deep end in the sense that when I hit high school, run around with the wrong people, and actually, ended up living in sin. And we had even the last whole year of my senior year in high school, if not the latter part of my junior year. I mean, we had, it was common to have weekend keg parties. So now, in my time, way back there, in the 50s and 60s, we would have beer parties. Nowadays, they have, I understand, I've never had one, but people get together to shoot heroin and take their pills and make them high and down. It's heroin, it's marijuana, it's everything. But back in our time, it was beer, whiskey. And of course, alcohol is a drug. Most people don't realize that. This whole nation is controlled by leaders that take drugs. They're drinking their champagne and their whiskey and their beer, and these are drugs. And so that's what we had in my time. Well, anyhow, so then it all come to a head when I was 21 years old. Now, I was an alcoholic before I graduated from high school, full-blown alcoholic. And so then one of my classmates in the junior year of high school, he quit school and he joined the Navy. And he ended up working in pharmacy. Now, he was in the Navy, but would you believe? Now, I'm born and raised in North Dakota, so this is all in North Dakota. And would you believe the Navy had an installation in Findlay, North Dakota. And it had a huge tower that went up, I don't know, it was, a couple thousand feet high. And of course, in those years, there was no satellites. And so for communication, they had to have these huge towers. And of course, he was stationed at this small base in Findlay. And of course, he worked in pharmacy. Well, now he's within about no more than a 2-hour drive back to where his hometown and where I'm still living in North Dakota, in south central North Dakota. Findlay's more up in the north central. And he would bring drugs. Now, I don't know what kind of drugs they were. I wasn't interested. All I knew is we would take some of these pills and you could stay awake for 48 hours, and then other pills would bring you back down so you could go to sleep. And I don't know, it was a mess. And I had no knowledge of what was going on. But mixing alcohol with these pills was a bad combo. Well, wouldn't you know it? He then is transferred from Findlay, as I recall, to Hawaii. And so my drug supply was cut off. Now, I didn't know that I needed them. I had no clue. And so in the natural realm, the world would say I was going through withdrawal. but also in the spiritual realm, there was a lot of things going on as I look back. Now, at the time, I had no clue what was going on. But my favorite grandfather had passed away when at this time, and about 2 years before this. And now here I have to cut this off and just hold on to that thought with my grandfather, and we'll be back in the next session.